I'm Angela.
And I'm Paige.
Join us as we dive into our obsession with true crime, history, and mysterious stories. We'll explore the intricate details of the corrupt, the cruel, and the calculating.
We assume no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this episode. The Corrupt Podcast is based on the facts and our opinions of the case. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Corrupt Podcast.
Elisabeth Fritzl is an Austrian woman who was imprisoned by her father, Josef Fritzl, in the family cellar. At the age of 18, she was lured into the cellar, a place typically off limits for the rest of the family, beginning almost 24 years of captivity and horrific abuse from her own father.
This is part 2 on Elisabeth and Josef Fritzl. If you haven't already, go check out part 1 and then come back here. We left off with Elisabeth being imprisoned with 2 small children, Kirsten and Stefan. In August 1992, Elisabeth's third child, Lisa, was born. The birth was normal and Lisa seemed to be initially healthy. At 8 months old, Lisa's health changed and she wouldn't stop crying no matter what Elisabeth did. Josef was worried about the noise, even though he had told Elisabeth that the cellar was soundproof, and Lisa's cries made him angry. Josef took Lisa upstairs and left her on the doorstep for 10-year-old Doris to find the next morning. Lisa had a note tucked in with her from Elisabeth saying that she was incapable with the demands of motherhood and was abandoning her daughter for Josef and Rosemarie's care.
Ybbstrasse was a popular area, but no one noticed a baby being left by Elisabeth, who had been missing for 8 years by this point. Child welfare was contacted, and it was agreed that Lisa was most likely Josef and Rosemarie's granddaughter, and it was okay for them to keep custody. Josef pretended to be suspicious, saying that they should have the letter analyzed to confirm if it was Elisabeth's handwriting. This was completed and confirmed to be from Elisabeth. He wasn't offering DNA testing, though, because that would have shown that he was also the father of Lisa.
Yeah, why did he open that can of worms with all of those things to check out and not anybody question about the DNA? These sound like the same damn cops from the beginning that didn't look into his background.
Yep. Now we're assuming that Elisabeth has snuck out from the cult and left a baby on the doorstep in the night and then disappeared again. She's been gone for 8 years. No one's ever looked for her.
Yeah. Lisa was also evaluated by a doctor and had open heart surgery, but we couldn't find the exact cause of the need for the surgery. Lisa was then kept upstairs in the custody of Rosemarie and Josef. The doctors noted that Lisa appeared to have been well taken care of, her clothes were clean, her fingernails trimmed, and her umbilical cord showed she was born most likely in a hospital.
Boy, how wrong those doctors were.
Yep.
In December 1994, another daughter showed up on the front steps of 40 Ybbstrasse. This baby, Monica, was fussy and restless as well, but Rosemarie found a small hair wrapped around Monica's toe that had become ingrown and painful. Once removed, Monica was a happy baby. The cellar was so dark and the hair so thin that Elisabeth couldn't find the source of Monica's pain. Now there were 2 children, Kirsten and Stefan, in the cellar, and 2 children, Lisa and Monica, upstairs.
Another weird thing with Monica's arrival, not only the cold overnight temperature and the miracle that the baby didn't freeze, was a pre-recorded message Elisabeth sent to their home phone. Rosemarie told the social worker that the message was obviously pre-recorded with Elisabeth saying she was leaving another child for them to raise. Rosemarie thought it was very odd since they had recently changed their phone number and only she and Josef knew the unlisted phone number.
Weird.
Yeah.
So many questions here, Rosemarie. How would have Elisabeth got the phone number if it's unlisted and only 2 people know it?
Yeah.
Not even an inkling that something's not right there, Rosemarie?
Damn it, Rosemarie. Get it together.
To the outside world, Elisabeth was viewed poorly by her family and neighbors. Her siblings, Rosemarie the daughter, and her favorite brother Harold couldn't understand why Elisabeth would have left right before moving in and spent years without calling or reaching out. The neighbors thought Elisabeth was a disgrace to a nice family, clearly a bad parent who abandoned her children for her parents to raise. After Monica's appearance, the story made headlines in the newspaper saying, "Mother gives away second baby." To Josef, this proved that he was getting away with it. He had successfully brought a second baby upstairs and kept his daughter and 2 other children in the basement for 10 years.
After that, Josef started expanding the cellar area. There would be more children and more space was needed. He also wired Elisabeth's electricity usage into the 9 apartments upstairs, so he never paid for the electricity, but his tenants complained of incredibly high electric bills.
I'm not sure if this is safe to do. I would assume running an electric main from one apartment into another would be a safety issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thought of a fire is terrifying, with multiple people being kept in the basement without an escape, and no one knows they're there.
Yeah, they would have died. Josef added a refrigerator, oven, a shower, hot water, a washing machine, and pipes to better ventilate the cellar in his 1993 renovation. The completed cellar would be a whopping 650 square feet. The children now had a separate room with a long corridor that was separate from the room Elisabeth was forced to share with Josef. Stefan was 4 years old and completely terrified of the new space. Having spent his entire life in one-room dungeon, the idea of new space was overwhelming to him. Poor Stefan. Poor baby.
I know. Elisabeth attempted to make the area homey by painting on the white bathroom tiles. She painted a yellow snail with a green shell and a purple octopus. One of the children appeared to have painted a flower and a fish as well.
Josef also bought the children toys and ordered their clothes from a catalog. Josef allowed them to pick some of their own clothes, but other times he picked the clothes for Elisabeth. Josef then forced Elisabeth to parade around in the clothes for him.
Josef would bring Lisa and Monica to the cellar while he was working, for Elisabeth to babysit. The visits for Lisa had to stop when she began talking. It was really hard on Kirsten and Stefan because they didn't understand why their siblings were going upstairs and they couldn't. So Elisabeth had to ask Josef to stop bringing Monica downstairs as well. Like the upstairs family, the family in the cellar was terrified of Josef. For the kids' birthdays, Elisabeth would make cake and try to make it a celebration. When Josef joined, he of course just made it worse, showing up in a Krampus mask and sneaking up behind the kids as a joke. Josef would also threaten to kill the children if Elisabeth didn't follow his demands.
What a creepy way of celebrating.
Yeah, they were terrified.
Also, I think makes sense that he's getting more comfortable. I don't know how you would feel about this, but I feel like he's definitely getting more comfortable because he's renovating more, he's adding things for them. He's kind of thinking he's living his best life, like best life of both worlds. Like nobody knows they're down there. He has this secret. He likes it.
Yeah, I think so too. I would agree with that. This is the true family that he wanted because they are literally forced to obey him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's not a whole lot of revolting like there would have been with the upstairs kids because they had, you know, society pushing on them to act like normal kids, teenagers, you know, they push back. 7, 8, 9, they're sassy.
And the freedom to run away.
Exactly. These kids are stuck in a 2-bedroom cellar, nowhere to go, no outside influences on them, terrified of him. So in a way, he's able to mold them more than maybe we would be able to mold our child, you know, sending them to public school and things like that.
Yeah.
It's definitely Josef in his element, though, in a sick, twisted way.
Occasionally, Josef would show up with things the kids had never experienced. For Kirsten's 5th birthday, he brought a container of yogurt, strawberry cake, chips, and 2 Kinder eggs. On another occasion, he brought down snow and a small mirror. It had been years since Elisabeth had seen her reflection, and Kirsten and Stefan had never seen their reflections before, so they were delighted. That's so sad. So incredibly sad. You wouldn't think of those small things.
Yogurt.
Yeah.
He brought down yogurt, and it was a big deal. I think that tells you what they were living on.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like snow and a mirror, That could definitely be huge for them.
I'd break that mirror and use it to stab him in the throat.
Oh, yeah, that thing's a weapon.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He probably took it from her.
Well, he even allowed them to have real metal silverware by this point, convinced that he and Elisabeth were now in a consenting relationship. The rapes continued, and because Josef refused to use contraceptives, Elisabeth was pregnant again in 1995. She knew that it was different this time, but again without prenatal care or a hospital delivery, she managed to deliver twin boys on April 28, 1996. Josef sat in the cellar having dinner with Stefan and Kirsten, while Elisabeth lay on the floor of the bedroom giving birth to the babies. Michael was born first, and his umbilical cord was pale, but before Elisabeth could truly look him over, Josef snatched him away, and she was in labor again with Alexander. The birth was incredibly difficult and would have required hospital intervention in a normal situation.
Both boys were born at approximately 6:50 p.m. They seemed healthy, but within a few hours, Michael's legs went rigid. He refused food and was wheezing. When Josef arrived the next day, Elisabeth begged him to get help for Michael. Josef just said, "What will be, and he refused to help them. Baby Michael died on May 1st, 1996, at just 3 days old. That one affected me. It's terrible.
It really is.
Elisabeth had done everything in her power to save Michael, but he turned blue and died in her arms. Josef didn't even check on them, so Michael laid wrapped in a blanket on the bed for over a day. Kirsten was 8 years old and Stefan 6 years old, and they witnessed everything.
On May 2nd, Josef picked up Michael and put his remains in the furnace. Then he told Elisabeth it might have been a good thing that their son died, because he might have been disabled.
This whole thing is just fucked up. It was so terrible. Like that he would put, being in Elisabeth's position, having your baby die in your arms, and then your father, the one who impregnated you, throws your baby in the furnace. It's just the whole thing.
You know, he deliberately left them in the cellar, knowing that the baby was probably going to die.
Yeah.
And he just did not want to deal with it. So he would have left them down there that extra day, and then he just comes down and the baby's on the bed. Like there's not even anywhere that they can put him to rest.
Yeah.
Ugh. Josef sold the Seastern bed and breakfast in April 1996, deciding instead to purchase properties around Emstetten. He also started up a company selling women's underwear. The serial rapist was selling women's panties. Let that simmer for a second.
That's dumb. So dumb.
Gives you like the ick if you think about the women that bought those undies.
Yeah. It gives me a feeling I don't want to feel. Like it's disgusting.
This whole episode gives me the feelings I don't want to feel.
Exactly. When Alexander was 15 months old, he too appeared on the doorstep of 40 Ypstrasse. Weirdly, everyone said that Alexander was the spitting image of Josef. Lisa would be adopted legally, but Josef had found a way to make money on the children with Monica and Alexander. If he fostered the children instead of adopting them, he received 400 euros per child per month from the state. Josef's official statement said,
"They were sickly and cried too much in the cellar for my liking." This may have been true if the children were sick, especially Lisa, but I think Monica and Alexander's appearance upstairs, he had figured out a way to make money on the situation.
It doesn't appear that anyone even looked for Elisabeth this time.
In 1997, Josef took a 2-week trip to Kenya, leaving the upstairs family and downstairs family to fend for themselves. He mailed a postcard to a friend with a veiled comment about how he was doing more than just visiting a different country, but having a good time hooking up with the locals, which is super great since he's refusing contraceptives and medical care for Elisabeth.
Yeah, he's a perverted scumbag. There's more to it. I don't have the vocabulary to call him all the names that he deserves. Elisabeth became ill while Josef was away in Kenya. She felt sick all the time and looked like someone much older than her 31 years. She continued schooling with Kirsten and Stefan, and when Josef wasn't around, she impressed on them that their life was not normal and there was a whole other world out there.
Just a year later, Josef traveled to Thailand with a friend and his wife. They were gone for 4 weeks. During an afternoon shopping trip, the friend's wife recorded Josef shopping for a red party dress that would have been too small for Rosemary. Josef got upset and barked at the wife to turn off the camera. His friends tried to laugh it off, but Josef said nobody sees that video and told them the dress would be for his girlfriend. Clearly, the dress was not for his girlfriend.
It was for Elisabeth.
Absolutely, something he was going to make her strut around in the cellar wearing for him.
Yeah. On Christmas Day 2002, Elisabeth gave birth to a last baby, Felix, in the cellar. Felix was Elisabeth's 7th baby and Josef's favorite. Josef kept buying properties, a significant amount of apartments. He was now 67 years old with 14 children. He started to view the cellar as a threat. Kirsten was 14 years old and Stefan 12 years old. In a couple of years, they would be able to overpower him. Damn right they would.
So Josef began to plan for Elisabeth, Kirsten, Stefan, and Felix to leave the cellar. In his plan, Kirsten and Stefan would have small cooking jobs at his property buying business. Elisabeth would be his secretary, and Felix was to be the heir and successor. Josef spoke endlessly to Elisabeth about the move out of the cellar from 2003 to 2007. He was convinced that Elisabeth and the children were so submissive and reliant upon him that they would never speak about their lives in the cellar. In the fall of 2007, Josef gave notice to 2 of his tenants, saying he would need them to move out by the end of the year. He told them he needed the apartments for his daughter, who had been in a cult, but was getting a divorce and moving back home.
Josef had Elisabeth write another letter, which he mailed from a city 20 miles away. In the letter, Elisabeth said that she would be returning home with her children. Before the plan could be completed, Felix became sick in March 2008. Felix would recover, but Kirsten then also got sick. Unlike Felix, she just got more and more sick. She had a fever, cough, and fits like epilepsy again.
On Saturday, April 19th, 2008, Josef agreed that it was finally time for Elisabeth, Kirsten, Stefan, and Felix to be released from the cellar after 23 years, but only early because Kirsten had taken a turn for the worst and was very sick.
Rosemary was vacationing with a friend, and the 3 other children were asleep upstairs in their beds when Elisabeth and Josef carried Kirsten out of the cellar. They laid Kirsten on Josef's bed at around 6 a.m.
After making Josef promise to call for help right away, Elisabeth hurried back to the cellar to comfort Stefan and Felix, as they had never been alone in the cellar before. Josef did not call paramedics right away. Instead, he waited for at least 90 minutes, doing God knows what, before he called for emergency services at 7:56 a.m.
At 8:30 a.m., Kirsten arrived at the hospital and was put in a medically induced coma by Dr. Riker. Her liver, kidney, and lungs were failing. Kirsten was wearing white pants, red socks, and an orange tank top. One of the paramedics was Dr. Riker's son, so he was able to relay the strange story to Kirsten's doctor right away. Josef told the paramedics that he had gone out to buy bread rolls when he almost tripped on his granddaughter unconscious on the steps, so he immediately called for help. The son had a strange feeling about 40 Yibstrasse, and his dad told him to write it all down. Dr. Riker also had a weird feeling about Josef's story. Never in his 30 years had a parent dropped a sick child off on another's doorstep instead of the hospital.
The story didn't make sense. Where was this cult located that Elisabeth was close enough to leave Kirsten on her parents' doorstep, but not just take her to the hospital? And she didn't have a phone to call for help? Times had changed. This was now 2008.
Yeah, the whole thing was sketchy.
And Dr. Reichert and his son are the very first people to see that.
Finally.
At 8:20 a.m., Josef arrived at the hospital. He could provide nothing about Kirsten except for her name, claiming he did not know her medical record or her age. The only thing Josef could provide was another letter from Elisabeth. The letter had a breakdown per day of Kirsten's symptoms. On Wednesday, Kirsten had fits and was given aspirin and cold medicine. Thursday's entry only said, cough getting worse. The Friday entry said her fits were getting worse and she was biting her lips and tongue. The letter begged for help, saying that Kirsten had never been in a hospital and Elisabeth would see Kirsten soon.
The odds of Kirsten living were slim, especially when the doctors had no idea what made her sick to begin with. She was kept in the intensive care unit while a plea was sent out for Elisabeth to leave the cult and come help her daughter. Unknown to the family on April 21st, the police issued a warrant for Elisabeth's arrest for grievous harm through neglect, abusing or neglecting a minor or defenseless person, and abandoning an injured person.
Medical staff suspected that Kirsten had possibly attempted suicide by poisoning herself, but they were really struggling to connect the dots. Kirsten was a mystery to medical staff and investigators. She didn't have a birth certificate, health insurance, or a passport. They couldn't find any information on her. They kept Kirsten in a medically induced coma and monitored her symptoms from the ICU.
A cult and commune expert reviewed the letters that Elisabeth had supposedly sent over the years. In his review, he thought it was odd that Elisabeth never once mentioned her beliefs or any important details. The expert speculated that while the letters were written by Elisabeth, someone else had instructed her on what to say. He also punched more holes in the cult story by pointing out that children were usually raised in the cult as the next generation, not abandoned.
With the plea for Elisabeth to come forward on the radio, it wasn't long before news channels and newspapers picked up the strange story as well. The police used this to their advantage, again pleading with Elisabeth to come forward. It was by chance that Elisabeth saw a TV news program begging for her to come forward. Elisabeth, Stefan, and Felix remained in the cellar without Kirsten for several days. Elisabeth's other siblings and Rosemarie had returned home. The police were also visiting, so it was hard for Josef to get away from his upstairs life.
Josef continued on like normal. He was interviewed by police and journalists, but no one noticed anything odd about Josef. He seemed to be very understanding of the situation. It had happened before, of course. This wasn't the first grandchild left on his doorstep. It was going well enough to plan for Josef until law enforcement contacted him on Thursday, April 24th, asking him and Rosemarie to take a DNA test. The police explained that women in cults frequently raised other people's children, so they needed to confirm Kirsten was actually their biological granddaughter. Josef agreed, but said he was too busy that day to come down. Then the next day, he was also too busy with work. Josef trying to dodge them shots.
Oh, he's absolutely sweating it now.
Yeah.
Josef used the time to speak with a lawyer. His plan was to make sure the lawyer was present for any questions the police would undoubtedly have for Elisabeth, Stefan, and Felix. He threatened Elisabeth of the horror and shame her family would go through if the true story came to light. A week after Kirsten's arrival at the hospital, Elisabeth was released from the cellar. She told authorities later that she was aware Josef was incapable of tolerating a situation that did not go exactly according to plan. So she convinced him that now would be just as credible of a time for her to surface from the cult. So at midnight, Josef entered the cellar with new clothes for Elisabeth, Stefan, and Felix.
They followed Josef through the 2 electronically secured concrete-filled doors, through the hole in the wall, upstairs, and out of the cellar. After almost 24 years, Elisabeth was free from the cellar. She was 42 years old, Stefan 18 years old, and Felix 5 years old. The next morning, she rushed to her daughter's side. Josef called the hospital to say that Elisabeth had finally shown up, but she insisted the police should not be involved. Dr. Riker felt that Elisabeth's actions were criminal neglect. So after hanging up with Josef, his first call was to the hospital to bar access to Kirsten until he got there, and his second call was to the police.
When Elisabeth arrived at the hospital, the police were waiting. Dr. Riker, Elisabeth, and Josef visited Kirsten in intensive care. As the medical staff watched, she appeared to be very reserved and a caring mother. Elisabeth whispered encouragement to Kirsten before leaving the hospital room. It was at this point that Dr. Riker called downstairs as the signal, and 3 plainclothed police officers arrested Elisabeth.
Elisabeth was taken to the police station and placed in an interrogation room, separate from Josef. They asked Elisabeth about her life in the cult, but Elisabeth gave simple answers that did not provide enough information about her life for over the last 20 years.
Investigators switched tactics, telling her that if Kirsten died, she could be charged with manslaughter. They picked up a phone and started dialing, saying they were contacting social services to put Stefan and Felix into care. With the risk of losing her children, Elisabeth agreed to talk, but with the condition that her children would stay with her and never have to face Josef again. She told the full story to investigators, speaking without stopping for almost an hour. Elisabeth told them,
"I don't know why it was so. My father simply chose me for himself."
That hour-long story was the tip of the iceberg, and it would shock the entire world.
At 11:15 p.m., in the other interrogation room, Josef was arrested. The next day, investigators finally got the DNA sample from Josef. When the results came back, it proved that Josef was the father of all 14 children. Stefan and Felix were out of the cellar, but in an upstairs bedroom waiting for Elisabeth's return. Authorities arrived at 40 Ypstrasse to pick up Stefan and Felix. When Felix saw the moon for the first time, he asked the officer, "Is this where God lives?"
Elisabeth, Stefan, Lisa, Monica, Alexander, Felix, and the rest of the Fritzl family were taken to a special apartment at the psychiatric and medical facility Amstetten Mauer Clinic. Kirsten awoke from the coma on May 15th, and for the first time in her life saw real sunlight. She made a miraculous recovery, and we were unable to find what had made her ill in the first place, but we can assume it was probably that foul and moldy cellar that was the cause.
Rosemarie had been granted permission from the police to go back to 40 Ypstrasse to pick up belongings from the cellar and upstairs that the kids needed in June 2008. She spent 40 minutes at the property that was still considered a crime scene. Elisabeth, Rosemarie, and the 6 children lived at the clinic together. They learned a new normal and started the process of working through the trauma. The family had a team of 14 doctors to help them navigate everything from schooling to light sensitivity and difficulties in adapting to the new open spaces.
Elisabeth was 42 years old, Kirsten 19, Stefan 18, Lisa was 16, Monica 14, Alexander 12, and Felix 5 years old. To figure out a new blended lifestyle would have been an incredible feat, no matter if you were upstairs or downstairs. Everything the upstairs kids knew was a lie. So, from our perspective, every single one of them is just absolutely amazing.
Agreed.
After 2 months, Elisabeth asked Rosemarie to leave. And according to Rosemarie's sister, it was because Alexander called Rosemarie Mama instead of Granny, and it upset Elisabeth. Josef provided investigators with the electronic passwords to the 2 remote-controlled doors, and the true horrors of what Elisabeth and the children had endured became known. The passage behind the shelf was so narrow that the police had to crawl in one by one. After entering the cellar where Elisabeth lived, the investigators noted that the walls were wet with condensation. The air was so foul that they could only work in 3-hour shifts.
Oh my God. The police found 15 diaries documenting Elisabeth's life from 1988 to 2008. She kept the entries very minimal, always afraid of Josef reading the notebooks. Notes were made about milk running out, her brother's birthday, and important events going on with her family upstairs. Many ominous items were found in the cellar, including 10 packets of the date rape drug, Rohypnol, 2 sets of handcuffs, photocopies of an apartment tenant's diary from 1989 to 1991, photographs of unknown naked women, grocery receipts, photographs of the upstairs family, and more.
2 files were kept by Josef documenting Elisabeth's life. Josef kept a green cardboard box in his office and a red plastic bag in the cellar. These contained many, many strange items that Josef had kept. 4 copies of the letter Josef had discovered with Kirsten on the doorstep. The original letter when Monica was left on the doorstep in 1994. 21 letters that friends had written to Elisabeth while she was a teenager, but Josef had kept. And a 10-page letter from Harold to Elisabeth in an attempt to help her with life at home with Josef before her disappearance.
When confronted with the handcuffs, Josef said that he bought them at a flea market, but he never used them on Elisabeth, and he's not quite sure why he even kept them. Nah, sure. Police held a conference confirming that Elisabeth had been held for 23 years in the cellar and some minor information on the investigation. The police didn't mention Josef's prior 1967 rape conviction, but the media found it and brought it back to light.
It was a truly shocking discovery with the cellar, but also remember that Josef had 2 warnings from exposing himself and an attempted rape, then a rape conviction in 1967, and twice had been suspected of arson.
Yeah, he should have been suspect number 1.
If anyone had thought to look at him, yeah, the dad who had been, Brigitte knew that he was molesting her even.
Yeah.
Her siblings all knew that life at home was hell, even if they didn't know about her being molested. They all were living through hell with Josef. So again, I'm just kind of dumbfounded why none of her siblings, her mom didn't think to say something.
Yeah.
In May 2008, Josef's lawyer told the press that he was upset with their one-sided view of him. He went on to say,
"I'm no monster. Kirsten wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for me. I made sure she got to the hospital. I could have killed them all and nothing would have ever been known about it."
Yep, he's the hero here by getting his granddaughter/daughter out of a cellar for the first time in 19 years, then waiting 90 minutes to call for help.
Yeah, he's a real one.
He's a real hero. The question became how to charge Josef so that he would never be free. Investigators felt the key would be that Josef needed to be charged with manslaughter or murder for Michael's death.
A neonatologist confirmed that Michael could have been saved if he had been provided with emergency treatment. With the report on Michael, the prosecution was able to seek a murder charge. Josef would be charged with murder, slavery, rape, deprivation of liberty, coercion, and incest.
The trial began on March 16, 2009. Josef had a talent for warping the truth to benefit himself and blatantly lying, even while on the stand. When asked about Elisabeth's disappearance in August 1984, Josef said that he took Elisabeth to the cellar originally not to keep her, but that he went to her room at 8 a.m. and she was lying in her bed, fully clothed and slumped over. He immediately assumed that she was high from sniffing paint stripper, and something had to be done about her drug addiction. So he asked Elisabeth for help in the cellar, and then showed her a letter he had found to Elisabeth from a married man. According to Josef, Elisabeth became irate, saying she would leave the family, and she was clearly very high because her answers were not making any sense. So he pushed her into the storage room and locked her in. His story continues that she didn't resist, and the garage door had been left open, so she could have left at any time.
Yeah, that explains the children you had with her. Stupid ass.
Yeah, because everybody willingly stays in a cellar for almost 24 years.
It's really pathetic. Just hearing how he was trying to explain things. Stupid. Josef said that he didn't mean to keep Elisabeth in the cellar forever. It was just meant to be short term, but then he began to see her as a woman and had kept her in isolation. He showed no sign of remorse or regret. Josef said that he found an ideal partner in his daughter. He could have sex with her, and she couldn't refuse, but also that he never raped Elisabeth because after 4 or 5 months, the sex just happened and was consensual. He even went so far as to say that he never used condoms because she would have felt less. It's estimated that Josef raped Elisabeth 3,000 times during her 23 years in the cellar.
At trial, Josef said that Elisabeth had been corrupted by other men in her life. She had an Uncle Franz that had molested her, then paid her money to keep quiet about it. No Uncle Franz has ever been located to support this story. Josef then continued by saying the abuse made her seek out sex with adults when she was 13 years old, including with a married man. When asked about Michael's death, Josef said that Michael had been stillborn. On stand, Josef said,
"One day I came into the dungeon and Kirsten and Stefan told me that Elisabeth had had a baby. When I went into the bedroom, Elisabeth was lying in bed and crying. She told me she had given birth to twins and one of them was dead. I never saw Michael alive. He was already dead when I came into the dungeon and wrapped in a piece of cloth.
According to Josef, he spent 3 hours with Elisabeth while they decided what to do with Michael's body, and it was a joint conclusion to cremate him in the furnace.
Josef told the prosecution about the time-delayed switch he had installed on both remote-controlled doors, so the doors were timed to open eventually. This was to ensure if something happened to him, the doors would open and free them from the cellar. Elisabeth's cross-examination took place with a judge, but was recorded and played back for the jury so that she didn't have to face Josef in court. Josef's statements were read back to Elisabeth, and she disputed almost every statement as a lie.
The defense for Josef pointed out that he had a difficult childhood and that he felt the need to dominate his family because he struggled with inner powerlessness. They reiterated that Josef was no monster because he had brought Kirsten out of the cellar to save her life.
On March 16, 2009, the experts took the stand. One expert confirmed that the delayed switch to release the family did not exist.
So if Josef had died at any point in those 23 years, the entire family in the cellar would have also died. It's just another thing that the prosecution was able to prove Josef lied about.
A psychiatrist, Dr. Kastner, said,
On a mental level, everything works well. On an emotional level, there's a massive deficit.
She continued to explain that due to Josef's childhood and relationship with his mother, Josef suffered from a severe personality disorder with an inability to show compassion and a strong wish to dominate other people.
Finally, an engineer and expert witness confirmed that the cellar was not soundproof like Josef had claimed. In a devastating discovery, they confirmed that fists hitting rafters was very audible. A broom handle on the ceiling wall was very audible. The TV, radio, and CD player were just about audible. Cries for help were audible. Knocking on the entrance was very audible. Tenants in the apartment buildings above had heard bangs, children crying, and moaning from the cellar, but had never reported it to police. In fact, one tenant, Alfred Dubinowski, said that he heard banging, knocking, and what sounded like things being dropped coming from the cellar. Alfred did say something to Josef, but Josef told him the sounds were coming from the basement's gas heater. Rosemary claimed that she had no idea her daughter was locked in the cellar. The police statement about this topic said,
It defies logical thought to believe that a woman who had 7 children with her husband would make it possible for him to have another relationship and father a further 7 children with her daughter.
Does it defy logic, though? We know Rosemary and her 7 children were terrified of Josef. She had to have thought it was suspicious with making his own apartment and then a cellar that she was never allowed to access. There should be no place in your home that your spouse does not have access to. If she was ending up in the hospital from physical abuse and her family was begging her to leave Josef, you can see how she would have been all too willing to look the other way with Josef disappearing for hours at a time.
The trial would take less than a week and was very secretive. Initially, Josef pled guilty to incest, but not guilty to charges of murder and enslavement. On the 3rd day of the trial, Josef appeared different, and it was speculated that Elisabeth had shown up in person to the trial the day before. Josef told the judge,
I recognize that I am guilty. I regret it.
He also admitted to overlooking that Michael was so sick, but after seeing Elisabeth's testimony, he now understood how cruel it was to her. Oh, you don't say.
On March 19, 2009, Josef was found guilty of all charges. He would be sentenced to life in prison. Josef was sent to Stein Psychiatric Prison due to his age and concerns about attacks from other inmates. In 2023, he was transferred to a regular prison. There has been discussion on releasing Josef due to his declining health, and one psychiatrist labeling him as no longer a danger. Josef is 90 years old today and suffers from dementia. We'll keep you updated, but I really doubt he'll be released anytime soon. In 2012, Josef divorced Rosemary because she never visited him in prison, and he called her neglectful. It is assumed that Rosemary stayed married so that she could draw on Josef's pension. This left her without money or a home.
After the trial, Elisabeth and all 6 children had their names changed. Austrian law has blocked the media from revealing their new name or their location. Elisabeth and the 6 children have moved to a town known as Village X, where the townspeople are incredibly and amazingly protective of them. No trespassers are tolerated, and the area is continuously monitored by police. In 2019, a photographer decided to ignore the family's wishes and attempt to snag a photo. The village residents surrounded him and told him that Elisabeth's family did not want him there and to scram, which he promptly did, and it was apparently scary enough that he spoke to the Mirror about it later.
It's taken very seriously, as it should be. High five to Village X.
Absolutely.
Elisabeth and the children made a poster before leaving Amstetten that was hung for several weeks. The poster reads,
"We, the whole family, would like to take the opportunity to thank all of you for sympathy at our fate. Your compassion is helping us greatly to overcome these difficult times, and it shows us there also are good and honest people here who really care for us. We hope that soon there will be a time where we can find our way back into a normal life."
Surrounding the words are drawing outlines of Elisabeth and all 6 children's handprints. In one corner, one of them drew a rainbow. We'll share the poster on our socials. I think it's really important to see. One of them drew a rainbow, and 3 of them had never seen a rainbow in their life. Elisabeth began a relationship with her bodyguard Thomas and is living a normal life. She helped her children through school and learned how to drive. In 2019, Thomas and Elisabeth got married. Her children are all adults now and live in the same village.
Way to go, Thomas. Let's go.
And Elisabeth, she got married. Get it, girl?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love hearing that. 40 Ypstrasse was slated for demolition in 2011, and it remained vacant for years. In 2016, Josef was forced to file bankruptcy, and the house was sold. The new owner was a married couple who also own a strip club and bar. The cellar was filled in with cement and can never be entered again. The upstairs was remodeled into apartments primarily for the use of bar and strip club staff. The story inspired the 2010 book and 2015 movie, Room. The drama is about a woman and her son that lived in a room and her son's first time experiencing the outside world. I saw that movie. It was really hard.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
I looked for it, but I was unable to find it.
Yeah, it was really hard to watch. But yeah, it was inspired by, so like her captor wasn't her dad, but it was a captor.
Yeah, put it into perspective with it being inspired by a true story, though. It's horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I read I'm No Monster by Stefanie Marsh and Bojan Pancevski as research for this episode. The book has more information on Elisabeth and what life was like for her and her family. I would, of course, recommend that you check it out. Josef's name will always be associated with this case, but it's important to remember that Elisabeth spent 8,516 days in captivity. Elisabeth, Kirsten, Stefan, Lisa, Monica, Alexander, Michael, and Felix are the heroes. We would love for you to become part of the Corrupt crew. You can find us on Patreon with multiple tiers and PayPal. This will score you our appreciation and will announce your name in a future episode. Both links are in the episode notes. Case suggestions and feedback can be emailed to us at corruptpod@gmail.com.
The sources for this episode would be listed in the episode notes. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Don't forget to subscribe to catch our new Corrupt content. Please also leave us a review wherever you're listening to this episode. Bye.
Bye.